Right now, we're going to welcome our next live guest. We've got Mike Bowden-Distel here with us. And Mike, before we get too into the CPG topics that we covered at the Future Supply Chain, you've got a brand new title. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I'm the head of intermodal solutions. And we decided to call me that because we thought it was inefficient to spend the first 5 minutes of every meeting explaining what a market expert does. And head of intermodal solutions, I think, is a good, concise description that I'm just the intermodal guy. That could have been the title. But
I love it. I love it. Mike Bowden-Distel, the intermodal guy, but also the CPG guy, because you're still writing the Stock Out, you're still hosting the Stock Out show and podcast, and still covering the CPG space as well when it comes to that. And so let's talk a little bit about that and frame it in what was going on at the Future of Supply Chain. Of course, we were in Northwest Arkansas, kind of the hotbed for some CPG companies. We had folks from Unilever there. We had some representation from Tyson Foods, and we were there in the home city of Walmart. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts around the CPG atmosphere was at the Future of Supply Chain?
Yeah, that's right. We had some of the biggest CPG companies there, and some of the interesting themes that emerged from talking to those companies was, really just how difficult forecasting is, which is always something that, I know, Anthony, you and I struggle with, seeing what's going to, come down the pipe. But, with CPG specifically, how much, consumer goods people buy is partially a function of sort of how much time they spend at home versus out and about. It's partially a function of just how sensitive people are going to be to price changes. But, heard from a lot of companies in transportation and shippers that really their forecasts haven't been all that accurate. And so really what they're trying to do instead is get the most up-to-the-second data available and react to that data. And one example that Nestle gave was if they can decide where that first truckload goes from the production facility, sort of which direction it goes, closer to the point of consumption or the time of consumption, they can alleviate a lot of stockouts. And so really it's more focused on that type of time frame. Also another theme that emerged was really the focus on automation. There's been so much issue lately, not just with labor shortages, but strikes in CPG that companies are really redoubling their effort to have automation. And one thing that's surprising is that it's not just about cost savings or the fact that machines don't call in sick. It's also about learning that there's data that they can collect from these machines that helps them manage their supply chains, help them sort of forecast where demand is going to be based on how quickly certain machines are getting ramped up and those things. So they feel like they can learn from the machines. And then Unilever made some good points about its acquisition strategy, which has a lot to do with leveraging its own supply chain capabilities. And you think about Unilever as a company that's acquired kind of younger, hipper brands like Liquid IV and Dollar Shave Club. And, I had sort of thought about those as, really sort of giving the company an avenue for growth and maybe attracting some newer customers, some younger customers. But, really they thought, well, these CPG companies, these startup CPG companies, as creative as they are, you get to a certain point and they can't manage their whole supply chain with an Excel spreadsheet. They have to, really, utilize the capabilities of a multinational company to really sort of make that next step. So I thought there were some interesting takeaways there.
Definitely a lot of interesting takeaways there. And Mike, it was great being able to see you in person after, I think, over 2 years. So awesome catching up in Arkansas. When you look at the landscape of what's going on in the CPG space, also kind of consider what's happening in consumer conditions. When you're looking at the purchases being made, of course, we can kind of break it down into different demographics, from those that are a little bit younger. Maybe they're struggling with student loan debt from time to time, or even though some of those are being deferred for the time being. But when you're looking at the scale or the quality of certain goods that are being purchased, are you going to be looking at maybe a higher end product first being kind of cut out as we're starting to see really inflation continue to really build up or really take hold as we continue to move throughout 2022?
Well, really, so far, the higher end products are the ones that have performed well. I mean, it seems like consumers that typically buy the higher end consumer products are the ones that will change their behavior much less as a result of the inflation, and they'll just save a little bit less. So those seem to be the ones that are most insulated, and really, like, Nestle specifically, it's been a big part of their strategy has been to move their product portfolio into the categories that address the higher income consumers. Those would be things like fresh foods, healthy foods, even like fresh pet foods. I think the ones that maybe you'll see people cut back on are kind of the maybe mid to low tier type products. A lot of the mass market products where there's an alternative, maybe a generic alternative or a lower cost alternative.
And Mike, so kind of the general state of CPG overall. I know we talk a lot about stockouts, of course, and product shortages, and one of those at the forefront of people's minds right now, including the Biden administration's mind, is the baby formula shortage. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that, how we got here from maybe a supply chain standpoint, and what can be done to alleviate some of the problems that are going on with the baby formula shortage right now?
Yeah, so how we got here is it was already running a little bit low, sort of beginning of the year because of this just supply chain issues like you've seen with a lot of food. And then there was the shutdown of the plant in Sturgis, Michigan, the Abbott Nutrition plant, because it was suspected that, 4 infants that got sick with a certain bacteria, and 2 of them died, that, one commonality is that they all had formula from this plant. And so that's been shut down for the last 3 months. And, really the CDC and FDA have, concluded their investigations and have not found a link between the, bacteria strains that those infants had and any bacteria that came from, those products. There was that, general category of bacteria that was found, in the Abbott plant before it was shut down. And maybe that bacteria should not have been there at all. But, kind of the more I read about this, the more I think, well, those babies didn't get sick because of the product. And, FDA really needs to approve, restarting that facility, which, should happen sooner rather than later. I guess they approved, having the sale of certain specialized products that come from that facility because some of those products are so specific to the needs of certain infants that might have, digestive problems or things of that nature. So Abbott, says they're basically ready to go in terms of, restarting. Now they do say that it's going to take about a couple of weeks once they get approval to restart the facility. You need to have people, machines in place, all those things. And then from there, about 6 to 8 more weeks before the product is available on shelves. And so that timeline will start when FDA gives its full approval. So, parents struggling to find baby formula, unfortunately, it's not going to be, next week where it's readily available. I did see Eric Kulish just published an article about, air freight, moving, formula from Ireland via air freight. That's also taking place from the Netherlands and various places in, Central and South America. So hopefully that helps things a little bit.
Like, when you're looking at this situation, does this kind of bring up other potential questions around quality control, not just with, the baby formula issue, but, when we're looking at the overall CPG market, we've heard about the challenges facing the supply chain. Does this kind of raise other questions in other segments as well?
Yeah, there's been, certain, basically recalls and certain just companies that have gotten a lot of bad press because of suspected contamination. You saw the thing with the Lucky Charms, where some people thought that they got sick because of Lucky Charms, which I'm not convinced they did, because just, the volume of how many boxes of Lucky Charms, it's like 300 million boxes of Lucky Charms get sold a year, and a relatively small number of people got, say, like 100 or 200 people got sick, and a lot of them didn't really attribute that until they saw that other people were attributing their sickness to that. Similar thing kind of with the Skippy peanut butter, where some people thought that was making them sick, even though there really wasn't any hard evidence that it was. And so I think a lot of, CPG companies are going to, have to, contend with, just kind of, maybe false information, or maybe not even intentional false information, but just, consumer, concerns that certain product is making them sick, and doing a good job of presenting the evidence that is really true. And I think actually Abbott Nutrition, which makes that Similac formula, has done a really nice job of defending themselves on Twitter and pointing out sort of what the CDC has said, what the FDA has said, and sort of the more you read about it, the more you think, well, those infants didn't get sick because of the formula.
An acceptable risk level for those folks who are purchasing those CPG products. Mike, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you on Freightwaves Now with us. What are you working on for the stock out coming up either this week or next week?
Yeah, so we have the new data in Sonar. Henry Byers did a great job of putting in new ocean data, and I'm going to talk about what that means for CPG companies, and just give some more thoughts on sort of the Sonar highlight reel, if you will, what the data in Sonar is means for CPG companies.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you as always. Right now, we're going to toss it over to the wall once again. We've got Thomas Wasson here for our next carrier update.